Alright, so I went back and I looked at some of those beta Pokemon from Gen 1, and I started thinking, I'm like, well, you know what, there was one of them that I wanted to make that I forgot about, and this one I could actually really argue makes a lot of sense. So, this is another video that I could actually make all by itself, but we're going to kind of talk about it a little bit more. It kind of goes into the missing no data that's actually linked to like Lugia and all that. This is where it gets really bizarre, as well as, you know, the title itself of this video. So the beta Pokemon, okay, there's two Pokemon. I'm trying to think what it was originally called. It was Roardan. It was supposed to be like Godzilla and I think Godzuki, basically the baby Godzilla. If I remember that correctly. I could be just thinking about Hanna-Barbera's Godzilla. It's amazing how Hanna-Barbera managed to do all that back in the day. But anyways, so you have a Pokemon called Roardan, and there's another one I'm trying to remember. And I really want to say that those Pokemon were actually supposed to be beta Larvitar and Tyranitar. The beta Roardan actually has Venusaur's finalized cry, and they moved that over because Venusaur actually had a beta cry, which was completely different than its final version. That explains where they got that from. So, and here's where it gets even stranger. If you actually look into, okay, so when they took out the 39, the first set of 39 missing nos from the original 191 of Gen 1, or the 40 at least, they found out that, and then the 40, and then they started adding like the first 40 Gen 2 Pokemon that were supposed to be in the Space World demo. One of the few Pokemon that was not in that game, but its name was supposed to be in there. The data was actually, some of the garbage data would later be Larvitar, Pupitar, Tyranitar. So it really makes you wonder, and then followed by Lugia, and it's but most of these Pokemon, they were, like, keep in mind, they were ideas before they got finalized into Gen 2. Because, again, if you play Gen 1, Pupitar, Lugia, Tyranitar, and Larvitar, they were not in Gen 1. But they probably were going to be at one point, or something, really. They had the idea at some point. So, they had the idea since Generation 1, but it carried over until Generation 2. And I'll tell you what, I am glad to this day that they decided to keep those Pokemon, because a Tyranitar is very useful, especially when you're trying to fight through Battle Frontier and Pokemon Emerald. I always use Tyranitar. Tyranitar is always really useful. So basically, like, okay, so we'll explain it like this. So Tyranitar is supposed to be, like, if you look at its chest area and compare it to Roardan, Roardan was supposed to be, like, by definition, it was supposed to be like the Pokemon that it takes after. You have the Pokemon. It's a very tall Pokemon. It's also a very violent Pokemon. Where if it's young, starts crying or something like that, it basically destroys the whole vicinity within, you know, again, if you've ever watched any of the old Godzilla movies, you know where they're basically getting the idea from. Because, again, like I said before, you know, Pokemon was basically inspired by, like, Ultraman 7. Again, the same superhero Ultraman 7, the space aliens and all that from the trilogy. They were, you know, basically that was what those old Japanese monster movies were. You know, you had, you know, they would set up these little replica versions of Tokyo. They would destroy it. The citizens would go crazy. And then all of a sudden, like, they'd also have, like, a hero they depend on. Or maybe to them they call him a god. And he would, you know, his goal was to protect the people from any sort of danger. And, you know, you see, like, Godzilla fighting, oh, geez, what was it? Like, you know, you had, like, Mecha Godzilla. And then you had, like, a ton of other Pokemon that were based on, like, the, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, what it was called, but they basically were inspired by those old movies. Tons of people, they put so much work into those movies, and how they destroyed those sets at the end of the day, it's nuts. But they really loved what they did back in the day. So that's pretty cool, actually. But yeah, so okay, so it just goes to show you most of the Pokemon that were supposed to be in Gen 2 were in Gen 1. and then they carried some of them over to some of the later generations. So I'm not surprised in the slightest that, you know, Tyranitar and Larvitar and Pupitar were ideas way before Generation 2. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest. It seems like, again, if you watched my last video where I talked about how there was that Indonesian elephant called Trample, or whatever they wanted to call it, if it very well could have been Donphan. That's the I was mispronouncing it. I thought it was Dolphin, but I knew it was probably Donphan or something like that. Donphan and Fanpy. Yeah, Fanpy. More, because it's supposed to be like Bambi, but he's not a deer. He's definitely an elephant, but it's a baby elephant, so Fanpy and Donphan. And I'll tell you what, you know, I think it's pretty cool how Donphan still retains that. If you like look at its eyes, it's always got like that serious look on its face, but it's always got that smile too. If you know where to look, it's really cool actually. It's kind of like it's coated in like an armor and all that, and its long trunk and all that, and it's you know, it's like it looks like it's like an armored armadillo from like Mega Man X and all that sort of, you know. It's got its own little like its own body is its like own little defense, its own little shield, and it uses its body to take out its opponents. And Donphan's fast too, if I remember correctly. It was what was it, a rock and a ground type, or was it just a ground type? I think it was just a ground type. I could be wrong though. I know Fanpy was a ground type, but so was well, Larvitar was a rock and a ground type, or. And then, what was it, Tyranitar was like a dark and a rock type. So it lost one of its abilities after a while, but then it was... I had to double check. Maybe it's a rock and a ground type? No, it's a dark and a ground type. Because I remember you couldn't use Psychic against Tyranitar because it was always able to use like Crunch to... Kind of it made sense why, like, you know, like, you fight your rival in Fire Red and Leaf Green if you actually start with... He has a Tyranitar in the rematch because of that, you know, because most of his Pokemon were, you know, to balance out, he doesn't have that, he's got that dark type immunity, you know, so you had to, so if you take it out a Tyranitar, easiest way to kill a Tyranitar, times 4 damage, hit it with fighting types, take it out very easily. That definitely helps tremendously. So we have a bunch of unused Pokemon that were carried over. Now, basically, this is what I'm trying to figure out at this point. Now that we kind of have an understanding of what Pokemon are who, we still have to figure out what Pokemon, how many Pokemon did they have before Gen 2 and Gen 1. Now, again, Gen 1 had somewhere around 300 Pokemon, even though they settled on 191-ish, and they carried the rest over to Gen 2. But here's the thing, though. We might not know all that prototype data, or at least most of it hasn't been leaked yet. We still do have an understanding. You see, I found this out a while ago. There was a website where it stated, I even uploaded this, and they even stated that they noticed that the beta Pokemon, the index numbers for most of the Gen 2 Pokemon starts at 300 instead of like 192. And that kind of explains what we've been trying to figure out. I just figured this out. It's because that's when they basically stopped a lot of the Pokemon that they did. So the Pokemon that they did not use at that time, because roughly 300 Pokemon is when they were going to settle on Gen 1, but then they whittled it down to like 191, and then they decided, because again, you have to understand, it was technically supposed to be 101, 190, but they took Omega out, which was saved in index number 21, and Mew took that over. But Mew, actually, with Omega involved, would have been 191, because again, you have the 40 missing now, and then plus Mew and the other 150. So 1 plus 150 plus 40, 191. But you still have the 109, because again, 191 plus 109 is 300. But what Pokemon are we missing, though? It doesn't mean that they were necessarily missing those, but they could have been just beta Pokemon that were just carried over to Gen 2. Again, it could have been the Gen 2 Pokemon that were first seen in Generation 2. It could have also been the Generation 2 Pokemon that were in the 1997 Space World demo. It could have even been tons of Pokemon that we've never even seen before, or maybe all three, you know. So now you have this curiosity of basically we have to just compare it to a certain time and then try to figure out like what they went from there with. Again, Game Freak, so basically Gen 1 was supposed to have like 300 Pokemon they had created at that time, but again they settled on 191. And then when Gen 2 came out, because they were gonna like, okay, we'll make a sequel, we'll use all this content we already have, but then they started adding more stuff. And now they were right where they started, but on a much larger scale now because they had even more content. So I think it was like, we were up to like 600 something Pokemon at least. And I believe Satoshi Tajiri and even Ken, the guy who was the lead designer for the Pokemon, designs and all that, even stated that there were literally hundreds of designs they've gotten rid of. Sprite animations, shiny animations, front and back animations. So like, like when you're seeing your Pokemon and then when your opponent's seeing your Pokemon, the front and back sprites that you would use. I mean, I can understand coding is not easy and designing is not easy either, but it's just nuts, man. Like you try to look at Pokemon, like how they were designing it, and you just like, wow, man, I could definitely see why Satoshi Tajiri really wanted to keep this idea going, because I've always been a fan of Pokemon, but it's not until you make these kind of videos that you really start to learn like the other side of it, like how this was made, and it's just nuts, man. Like I can feel for Satoshi Tajiri with how he created so many ideas, and I think what's really nuts about the whole thing, why Pokemon over any other series like this though, like because you think about every video game is gonna have something that's scrapped, but it's like you have a series like Pokemon where like tons of people have played it, and it just seems like it's just that one series that, so when someone finally uploads something that nobody's seen before, you're like, oh, wait a minute, these ideas look like they could have just reused them into something else that we've seen, like a more updated version. Like when I saw, like, I'll be honest, like when you had like Pokemon like Crocky or Crocodile, it looks like a bug-eyed crocodile, baby crocodile. What's another Pokemon that's a crocodile that, is water type? Totodile. So it's like, you're sitting here trying to think like, like, wow, man, like maybe most of these ideas really, they really weren't used. Maybe they just pushed them off to the side and recreated something else. But then you start thinking, wait a minute, maybe they really did take those ideas and reworked them into something else. So they really did end up still using them. Again, a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon that were scrapped actually were in Generation 2. So they not only had the 151, but maybe all the Pokemon that were eventually added in there, they did use. Some Pokemon they probably didn't use because, like, I still haven't figured it out yet. Like, I mean, like a Pokemon Omega, for example. I mean, while, yes, Omega was scrapped from the game, again, the Mecha Godzilla Pokemon, but it would be like, what if there really was a Godzilla in that game? It would have been electric type. It probably would have been a steel type, too, because it's a robot. But it's like, if you really think about it, if they really did decide to do something with that Pokemon, what Pokemon do you think they would have used it as, I haven't figured that out yet. And if they do have an idea for it, what is it, that'd be pretty cool. So, it's like I've said before, I don't think, again, if you really look at some of the things that Nintendo and Game Freak have really changed over the years, and a lot of people wonder why they did this stuff, and I think really there are reasons for it. Like, why are there certain Pokemon that can learn certain moves, but then there's like this contradiction about like who they are, and maybe at one point that just never was the case, but Game Freak just kept it the same because they didn't want, because again, when you start changing things, it might like not hurt people's feelings, but you might like, I wouldn't say offend, but you might cause drama between the fans, because like they're so used to this being here, and you know what I mean. So I can understand, maybe especially with a series like what Pokemon is, you're gonna run into things like that. You're gonna run into tons of problems with a lot of ideas that they created, where they're gonna have like all these ideas, maybe they don't use them, and then it just like they're like, okay, well, because we changed this, what do we add to this to make it look better? Like I'll give you another example again, like kind of like the video I was talking about earlier, one that I was really intrigued by. The Kangaskhan family. Kangaskhan was in fact supposed to be related to Cubone, but it's like at the same time though, up until what point though? Because again, you think about Kangaskhan is its own family, But then you start thinking about what Cubone and Marowak is. Once its mother dies, it basically just becomes a whole new Pokemon. And then that Pokemon starts another clan, and then they have a bunch of Pokemon together, you know? So, but at the same time, though, it's like, so Cubone is this Pokemon that has, you know, this family, but at the same time, though, it's this adopted family, you know? So it's adopted, and at the same time, it's got its real mother with it, you know? And I mean, it's sad. I mean, I'll be honest, you know, it scared me a little bit, like, when I found that out, you know, a mother, you know, and then it's like, you really think about it, you know, it's, you know, a child you know, its mother dies right in front of it, and, you know, it doesn't understand how the life and death cycle works, and so it takes its mother's skull, and, you know, and that was the thing that threw us off over the years, because we were like, you know, other than, like, I forgot to mention this in the other video, but it's like, that's what was throwing people off over the years, because when you look at what Cubone looks like, you don't see it. You don't see what it looks like without the skull on it, because it refuses to take it off. You know, like, again, like I've said before in that one episode of Pokemon where, you know, like, there was that girl that had that Cubone, you know, when Pikachu was fighting Cubone, I believe, you know, they were trying to see what kind of Pokemon it was, but then Misty was, I think it was Misty, where she basically was trying to say, well, what kind of Pokemon is Cubone? And then, like, you know, she tried to take the skull off its head, but it was always like trying to fight her off, like, shoo her away, say, like, you know, you can't do this, you know, because Cubone doesn't give up its mother's skull, because that is its mother's. So that's basically all it has left to remember it. So it wears its mother's skull, so that way it knows who it is. But at the same time, though, it's supposed to be. Then eventually, that Pokemon goes from being, you know, it was lonely and weak, but then it just became a lone wolf. And then, you know, Cubone becomes like this, like, as it evolves into Marowak, and as it would evolve into Guardia, the third stage evolution. That was eventually cut from the game due to cartridge limitations. You know, it would make a lot more sense, because now that Cubone has grown up to an adult, and it's like, not only is it breeding more Cubones and Kangaskhans, but it just, you know, you really see that it really truly is like I wouldn't say like a monstrous Pokemon, but, you know, but because it's like very strong, very, you know, very protective, and it doesn't give up. You know, now it's like this intimidating individual. Like, you see the character development there. I mean, I thought that was pretty cool that they included that in the series. It does make you wonder how much different the series would have been if they would have just kept adding on to it. And that's what I kind of feel like is the magic of Pokemon. You know, when you really think about it, you know, no matter how many ideas they took out and scrapped, they just knew where, like, if they did decide to go back and add something to it, that it would have been that same series. It still would have made more sense. But at the same time, it's like they knew how to, like, rewrite it into something that made it work. So even though they didn't have the Guardia and the baby Kangaskhan evolution, because again, you know, maybe there's two missing now. There was Guardia, and then there was another Pokemon, another baby Pokemon, baby Kangaskhan, and then before that, Pokemon would either evolve into Kangaskhan, but I think it would have made more sense it would have evolved into Cubone. So maybe Cubone wasn't always alone, you know. So maybe at one point that baby Kangaskhan was in fact supposed to be not just baby Kangaskhan, but Cubone's what it evolved into. I wouldn't be surprised. Again, Satoshi Tajiri, you're gonna have to, if anybody really does have the if anybody has the time and even has the luck to track him down while he's still alive within the coming years, I mean, and they have it, I wouldn't be surprised Game Freak has it saved somewhere in their database. They probably have a lot of information that regards to a lot of things that, you know, at one point might have been an idea, but it's probably somewhere in their database that it confirms that there's a lot of scrap Pokemon they had that they wanted to keep adding onto that they still haven't used yet, whether due to balancing or due to cartridge limitations, because that seems to be the one thing a lot of people are still trying to figure out is why did they have all these ideas but they never used them. And I just think it honestly had a lot to do with, you know, how they finalized the games at the time. If they basically went back and changed it now, it would be like, well, this is what Pokemon should have been at the time. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if they do take some of their ideas and rewrite them into the games, but like in a way that it would make a lot more sense, especially because they took a different approach. Like, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like, if they did decide that Marowak could evolve into another Pokemon, it would make sense. I mean, they would write it into it like, you know, Marowak furthers its evolution and then it watches over its clan, for example, and then it raises Cubones or it raises its young, and maybe it'd make more sense that Kangaskhan would have a mate then, even though I think Kangaskhan's were supposed to be breeding with Marowaks, or Marowaks were breeding with each other. And then it was just Kangaskhan was, you know, like Genghis Khan, the story Genghis Khan, where it basically was stating that it could in fact become, you know, more like an adopted child, because Kangaskhan's always female, would adopt its child, and there you go. But at the same time, though, here's where it gets even crazier. Say Cubone was in fact supposed to be Guardia. Then, I mean, if Marowak evolved into Guardia and that Pokemon died, then the skull that Marowak would be wearing would be a lot bigger, technically. So how would Cubone, a baby Pokemon, be able to carry that around? Now you got yourself a contradiction. See, in the story, because that's what they stuck with. They decided to write it in as Marowak is technically Cubone's mother. But at the same time, though, maybe not necessarily. Maybe Kangaskhan was Cubone's mother. I mean, I've looked at both sides of the story, and I mean, even to this day, I still don't know. I think it could be Marowak and Kangaskhan, because then there's people that have argued that Kangaskhan's baby could also be kind of like an offspring of a Cubone, but it's still a kangaroo. Technically speaking, I still think that Kangaskhan is a kangaroo, and I still believe Cubone is technically sort of a kangaroo, sort of like animal. It just, in a way though, in a way, a boxing kangaroo. Cubone becomes more of a ground. It becomes a bone, like boomerang and bone collector sort of Pokemon that uses bones to attack instead of such as, you know, like using its fists and like a boxing kangaroo, for example, Kangaskhan, for example. So you can kind of see the ideology behind it. But again, the Pokemon series has always had a lot of love and respect, but it's like you really start digging into this stuff, wanting to answer these hard questions for a lot of people lore wise, and you really, I mean, it could be anybody's guess at this point, but it really does make you wonder. Like, if somebody does make a Pokemon ROM hack, they should really write this stuff into it. I really would like to see, like, a timeline where you have a baby Kangaskhan evolves into a Cubone, and then that Cubone evolves into Marowak, and then that Marowak could either, a female Marowak could evolve into Kangaskhan, however that would work, and then the male Kangaskhan could evolve into a Guardia, which would basically be like the tribe leader of Kangaskhan's. And Kangaskhan's and Cubones would reside all together, you know. It's really interesting. It really is. Like, I think it's pretty cool, actually. But anyways, again, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please, I'll do the best I can. Again, like I said, anytime I can find anything and talk about it, I will. I think the next video I'm gonna upload it's not gonna have commentary, but it's gonna basically be about, you know, all these prototype maps that weren't used yet that I found, and kind of include like a description somewhere in there. But it would be thanks to the Helix Chamber too, that this is where we're getting most of this information from with the map data, because a lot of this stuff was leaked from Game Freak servers, and it kind of does confirm that there definitely was more to the Pokemon games, again, Generation 1 wise, that we're focusing on at the moment. So I think that'd just be pretty cool to check out.